All right, I think we're ready to start. So once again, hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Transforming the Enterprise with Blockchain Tokenization. So my name is Nick. I will be your host for this webinar, and I hope everybody can hear us, everybody can see us. Let us know if you have any issues with that. Just let us know in the chat, and then our team will help you with that as well. So I appreciate all of you guys investing time into this webinar. I know it's for all of us that these are pretty busy times, but I promise that the following hour that you invest in this webinar will be one of the best kind of educational investments in the blockchain space. So without any further ado, I would like to jump right into the introductions for our speakers. And the speakers lineup for the webinar is really outstanding, I would say. Well, first of all, it's a truly global webinar of ours because Pavel, he is located in Israel right now. Tim is in Kiev, I believe, in Ukraine, and I'm based out of Palo Alto, California. So it's going to be an interesting global one. So today I have real industry professionals with me, people that are hands-on with blockchain, people that do not talk nonsense, that do not talk hype, which is very important nowadays in blockchain space specifically. So Pavel, let's start with you. So could you quickly give a bit of your background and introduce yourself?
So I'm Pavel Kravchenko. I'm from Ukraine. I have a background in information security, so specifically cryptography. I've been working for security companies for quite a while. And in 2014, I went to Silicon Valley and joined the startup Stellar. So I was there for like half a year. Then it was like a Singapore company. And then in the same year, I founded, together with my partners, Distribute Lab. So our mission is to build financial internet, and we focus on tokenization specifically right now. So we're a product company, and I will introduce the product later as we go on.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We really are happy and honored to have you on the webinar. I've known Pavel for some time, and I already kind of see that he is a welcome speaker at a lot of different blockchain conferences globally. So he spoke literally on, I believe, on every continent where there's a blockchain talk going on. So yeah, Pavel, nice to have you on this webinar. So second up, Tim. Tim is head of technology in Intellectsoft blockchain lab. We've worked with Tim for quite a while now. So Tim, do you want to give your background real quick?
Yeah, sure, Nick. My name is Tim. I have more than 10 years of experience in tech on both service and product businesses. I held the chief technical officer position on 2 products, and one of them actually was acquired by Intellectsoft. So right now I'm working here as a head of technology of a blockchain division. And what I do is architecting blockchain-based solutions and helping our clients to basically understand blockchain technology and its value.
Thanks. Really honored to have you, Tim. You know, it's great that you're sharing your hands-on experience in this area as well. A little bit about me. My name is Nick Kurat. I am director of Intellectsoft Blockchain Lab. My career started around 15 years ago when I co-founded a first company of mine, which was the services company in IT. And so throughout, you know, starting with that time, I basically went through a number of companies dealing mostly with innovation technology, so emerging technology. And so naturally, I ended up kind of getting interested in this cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. And so when we took a look at the cryptocurrencies and the underlying technology, we kind of saw that there is so much more than just cryptocurrencies in this technology. And so from there, we decided to devote, you know, our full time to this space. So that's that. Let's quickly run through some of the points that we will be covering in this webinar. We will try to pack as much of insightful and actionable information as possible into this hour. So first, we're going to talk about state of affairs in enterprise-grade blockchains, right? So then we're going to be talking about some of the main concepts that blockchain technology brings and introduces in the enterprise. We're going to be talking about tokenization, which is one of the concepts. We're going to be having a really honest discussion, which is a rare thing in the industry just yet, about pros and cons, current challenges, the implementation examples, and implementation recommendation as well. So if you're looking in your organization to implement tokenization specifically or some other concepts, this will be of a huge value to you. And of course, we're going to have a Q&A session. So feel free to post your questions in the questions window or in chat directly. Our team will pick it up, and we will do our best to answer as much as possible in the end of the webinar. And lastly, we will have a couple of pretty important and actually exciting announcements. So stick around for that as well. So I personally believe that we all in this industry have enough of the talks about how blockchain is gonna, revolutionize everything, disrupt everything, and will lead us into bright new future. We really need to get down to hands-on stuff, right? So current technology that is available, the pros and cons, the advantages we can implement within our organization, the implementation specifics and things like that. So I totally appreciate having this webinar and having such a wonderful lineup of speakers. Without any further ado, let's jump right into the blockchain in the enterprise. So we all know that it started with cryptocurrency, right? So back in early 2009, Bitcoin blockchain was introduced. And so there it all started kind of rolling, right? Right now, when we're looking at all of these different platforms and frameworks out there for blockchain, we see that it's a different story. It's a different type of platforms, right? And so right now we have this notion of enterprise-grade blockchain, right? And it's obviously very different from what Bitcoin had to introduce in the very beginning. So Tim, could you elaborate a little bit more on what it means, the enterprise-grade blockchain?
Yeah, sure. As you said, the blockchain started with the cryptocurrencies. And at that point, everyone saw the potential of a public blockchain on the Bitcoin example, and especially the enterprises. And in general, if we look at the benefits public blockchain brings, we can see that a lot of them can be actually very helpful to be, for the enterprises. Immutable history, shared secured ledger, transparent data flows, strong cryptography, automation, all of that is very helpful and needed. But along with the benefits, there are some disadvantages too. And if you want to implement something into enterprise environment, being it new protocol or software, you need to make sure that it's super secure, resilient, can operate with the current technologies and legacy systems, that it has privacy when it's needed, and it is scalable. And when I say scalable, it's actually about both software and in terms of the talent. But I would say that there is a good news. So right away after this Bitcoin and the blockchain concept came around, business people started working on the private chains and frameworks to satisfy the requirements, like these requirements, and to bring a blockchain to the enterprise. So right now, I would say that there's a pretty wide range of implementations and tools that we can choose from build on them.
So could you actually expand a bit more on the platforms themselves? Because I know that there are obviously some of the kind of well-known and names that we are all familiar with. Even though from my experience, I was talking to the company from a banking segment, and I was really impressed that they are, in a bad way, that they were basing their POCs on public Ethereum. And so the guy was telling me that, hey, all of this blockchain story is okay, but it's not quite there yet because of the the throughput of the network and some of the other limitations that public networks would have. And so, yes, could you just give us a couple of examples of what you consider being enterprise-grade blockchains right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So as you said, there is well-known blockchains, and then the other ones. And at some point of time, we did quite a big research on what is on the market, and we had like 30 blockchains with a different or same functionality. Yeah, but we definitely know what is worth the attention and what we can build on. Yeah, just to give you a bit of a history. So when we started our first products or projects on Intellectsoft Blockchain Lab, there was no Ethereum yet, and there were only a couple chains that were more or less ready for some development. The first one was multi-chain, and then the second one was NXT. And when I said ready, I mean they had at least some documentation, some stable builds, and some interesting functionality. So multi-chain was a private version of a same old Bitcoin Core protocol, but with some tweaks like multi-currency support, and then it had custom consensus. And on the other hand, this NXT had a lot of new concepts and features, like they used proof of stake consensus, and they had asset issuing on the go. You don't need to restart the network to add something. And then they introduced concept of plugins. And this NXT actually stands for next generation blockchain. And these guys were the first one who came up with the idea of tokenization. And the most interesting thing they had is decentralized exchange engine on chain. So it was very interesting, very innovative, and I'm happy that we came across these guys. But still, both of these technologies had a lot of issues, especially with performance. And then multi-chain had all security issues that came with the Bitcoin Core. But if we look at the current state of technologies, right now I would say it's completely different. There is a parity. It's been there for a while. It's a private version of Ethereum, but with a lot of like infrastructural add-ons, and then the Ethereum Turing complete virtual machine, smart contracts concept, and then they have pluggable consensus there. So it's a good one because of Turing completeness and the integrated tokens. It is good for financial projects. We used it in gambling, and I would say it's good for IoT projects with the complex token economy. Then there is Hyperledger projects family. We at the Blockchain Lab closely working with the Hyperledger Fabric for the consensuses, for the consortium chains, and then working with the SOTUs for the supply chain projects. So Hyperledger Fabric is very good for if you know, like if you have a close number of participants, and the structure of relations between them is very complex. So it can be a subdivision in one big organization on even subdivisions on the multiple organizations. Sawtooth, on the other hand, has a much simpler structure, but with the same and powerful concept Fabric has. So it has this state layer on top of the blockchain itself. And when you're working with this blockchain, you're working with it like you worked with the regular database, and then all additional features and benefits that blockchain brings is under the hood. So for you as for the programmer, it's really handy. It's like you can have custom data formats and data structures, and then you even can run rich queries there. So this one is very useful. And then obviously there is Stellar that Pavel mentioned. And for me, it's like upgraded version of NXT because it has the same cool feature set, like assets issuing on the go, this decentralized exchange. But along with that, it has much bigger infrastructure. It has like rich servers, connectors, different protocols. It supports like it's compliant with the GDPR and KYC, AML thing, and then there is a lot of SDKs on different languages, and the performance is nothing compared to NXT. So it's very great. This one is very useful for tokenization and for connecting a real world assets to the virtual or the crypto assets. And there is also some blockchain that is on a radar, I would say. So it's something like EOS. They are pretty young, but we're really closely looking at them. And I think when EOS will be ready for the production, we'll set up a separate webinar for that.
Right. Yeah. Well, thanks. That's very helpful review, high level review. So out of these, what would be your recommendation, for our audience to look into in the 2019? Because I mean, you gave us a few names that some of the guys are pretty familiar with, right? And maybe implemented some projects in. But who is kind of you would consider to be like a new promising kid on the block that you have to put more effort into researching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this one is easy one. So I would say if you haven't heard about or worked with the Sawtooth, you have to try it. Some time ago, it was like a bit lagging behind the Fabric, and it just because the concept is much simpler than Fabric ones. They are progressing pretty fast, I would say. So from what I know, they have like a stable build already, and there's a lot of interesting features there. And yeah. So they have like parallel execution, and then their consensus allows them to run in both private and public environment. And yeah, so it's very interesting. I would say that this one is my favorite.
So, but Sawtooth is done by Intel, right?
Yeah, so it started with Intel started this one, and the interesting thing there that I think this is like the first blockchain that is heavily connected to the hardware, because their consensus, they call it POET. It's connected to the special chip inside of the Intel processors, and it is used for the actual consensus. It's like super secure and super closed, and then the leader of a chain decided right in that chip. Yeah, so it's interesting. But right now, from what I know, Intel is not in charge of it. It's now the Linux Foundation, the same as Hyperledger.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It has been very helpful. I learned quite a few things. So, from my experience, again, talking to many businesses that are looking to implement blockchain technology, be it tokenization or some other concepts, the expectations from the technology are pretty high, right? In, I would say, most of the cases, it's even to a certain degree unrealistic, right? So I find that one should really understand the core concepts that blockchain can introduce into the organizations, as well as some of the trade-offs that are happening when you're introducing blockchain into your technology stack. And so I really like how PwC puts it in one of their papers. We'll have it on the slide as well. So they say, hey, these are the main milestones that blockchain technology went through from the very beginning, right? So the first, it was obviously early 2009, where Bitcoin public blockchain was introduced, and so that gave us trusted shared ledger in a decentralized public environment, right? So that was that notion of having that trusted ledger between the untrusted parties. And then NXT in late 2013 introduced introduced to the market the tokenization concept, right? Which we are going to be focusing today, and Pavel knows all about it. And the last thing is smart contracts, which was introduced by Ethereum in mid 2015. And so we are most probably going to have a separate webinars on the first one and the third one. Today we're focusing on tokenization specifically, but let us know your feedback and some of your ideas, whether we have to cover the first and the third one, and which topics specifically within those larger topics you're interested in hearing. So yeah, let's dive right into the tokenization. So Pavel, talking to you right now. So could you explain in general what tokenization is?
So tokenization is the process of transformation of accounting and accounting system, where all the balances that represent certain assets, they now become in a digital form and represented by a digital token. So this is essentially a process where the new type of accounting system is created. So not a rocket science. We used to have a paper form for ledgers. Then we had traditional databases, which were not really secure. And now, because of cryptography and blockchain technology, we can have a more secure ledger to do accounting. So that's essentially tokenization.
So could you then expand a little bit more on the tokens? Because I believe, especially business leaders who are not necessarily technical, I believe they keep hearing about utility tokens and security tokens because of the ICO, STO world being pretty loud. But what kind of tokens are there? How do you classify them?
So first of all, we need to say what is a token, because it's quite generic technical term, and it's very confusing. As I must admit, the word blockchain is very confusing right now because media messes up with blockchain as a particular Bitcoin blockchain or Ethereum one, and blockchain as a technology, and blockchain as an implementation in some private some project. So these three concepts, they don't have the same features. In case of token, token is basically a digital ownership right, a digitized ownership right for a certain asset. And depending on what asset are we talking about, the token will be different. So obviously asset could be like commodity. Then you have asset-backed token. You can have underlying asset as security. then the token will be a security token. If you have some kind of a currency, internal currency for the project, then it's so-called utility token. And therefore, you cannot really compare them easily because the token is a technical term, which like it's a balance on some account that's protected by a cryptographic key. And then all these tokens are essentially, you have to compare assets, not the tokens.
Right. Yeah.
So the crucial difference between tokenization system and traditional database management is that the accounts and transactions are managed via cryptographic keys. So it used to be that user just send a request to an administrator to implement certain transaction, and then the administrator or the code base that's running with root rights did that. And now it's like in Bitcoin, user signs a transaction, and this transaction is confirmed and validated by a network, which could be a centralized network anyway. But you cut the middleman who is the administrator here.
So talking about the different types of tokens, getting back to that question, right? So the cryptocurrencies, can you compare or like give some of the hints how to kind of distinguish between the tokens and the cryptocurrencies? Because I understand that there's some confusion on the market right now about it.
So token is a generic term. You can say that cryptocurrency is a token, but you cannot say vice versa. Not every token is a cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency is a digital asset, digital currency, where governance, initial issuance and distribution, transaction processing and audit are decentralized. So this will be cryptocurrency. And it also implies that the whole system is permissionless. That's a crucial point. If it's not permissionless, it's not cryptocurrency. So if you look at the coin market cap and we see how all these tokens are organized, they're not cryptocurrencies at all. Because they were issued in a centralized way, they were sold by a company to the users. The governance is very centralized. Like even Ethereum, which kind of was a cryptocurrency, was affected by decisions from single person, and it was pre-issued and then sold. So the Bitcoin and other few currencies, you can say they are cryptocurrencies, and there are others, digital assets, so digital currencies or whatever they are, or some shit coins. Yeah, so where somebody just issued whatever coin they liked and they sold to like hamsters, and that's it.
The whole story, the good old story.
Yeah, that was the whole hype of 2017, that people tried to mimicry the Bitcoin, saying, oh, it's a decentralized system. You run a node, a master node, which is like has nothing to do with decentralization, and then pretend that it will be next Bitcoin, faster, cheaper, whatever.
For sure, yeah, and that's where blockchain technology as such, on the high level, got a pretty bad kind of reputation, because people would normally associate all of the things that are happening to so-called cryptocurrencies to the technology itself, and that's what makes me excited, because together we are working on a technology level of things, not some of the vertical kind of implementations of that. But yeah, let's get back to the tokenization, to the main topic. So could you run through some of the main benefits of tokenization? Because from what I understand, there have been always digitalization process of certain assets, right? And so one may kind of wonder, what is the difference between a digitized asset and the one that is in this new kind of tokenized accounting system? What is the difference?
So the main difference, as I said before, is that the accounts are managed via cryptographic keys, and every change in the system is signed with digital signature. So that's the main difference. Everything else is like minor. Then, obviously, when you start implementing a transparency between decision making, you have to apply some kind of consensus, which means that you need to use some kind of blockchain. So DLT, yeah. So that's it. But it's essentially the same database from the legal point of view. It's completely the same, whether it's on paper, whether it's in a tokenized system. It just the token is an ownership right. So obviously, it makes sense when the tokenization system is the primary source of information for the ownership rights. If it's not, then yeah, it doesn't make sense. So that's why tokenization is very slow, because people people initially thought, oh, we have Ethereum, it's like a depository in the cloud where we can add our like stocks, bonds, and then trade them and sell. But then from legal point of view, it's kind of nonsense yet, because these blockchains are not recognized as the main source of information for these ownership rights. They might be, but then it triggers a lot of other issues that have to be solved.
Right. Well, we'll get to the challenges. It's a very interesting topic about the, some of the barriers that are holding a little bit off, the mass adoption of that. But so could you expand a little bit more on the benefits? So, now I think I understand, the difference between the, these two systems, centralized one and tokenization accounting system. But what are the business benefits? What it brings for the business, where the savings are, or additional profits for that matter?
Right. So ultimately, it's the reduction of price. So just the same scale of magnitude as we switch from the paper system to a digital one, when you can automate processes. And in case of tokenization, you can also automate like onboarding, distribution, issuance, trading, transactions, and make it really secure. So much more secure than you used to have. And then it becomes much cheaper. So, and because of automation. So business receives an ecosystem where the assets can be seamlessly like moved. And it means at the end that increased liquidity for an asset. So that's the second biggest benefit as a result of the tokenization, is that if legal is in place, then secondary market comes with zero cost to business. So liquidity increases, and yeah, it also means that fractional ownership helps here, because you no longer need to sell something in big chunks, but you can sell it in fractions, because again, it's very cheap to manage even small, like tiny balances on a variety of accounts. Just that's a very, I would say, it's boring benefits, but boring businesses, accounting systems. If somebody told me like 10 years ago that they would build accounting system, I was like, fuck no, never. But now I do.
Right. Well, yeah, these boring optimizations and boring things that you're saving is what business is about, right? So that's how you kind of save money. That's how you make money. That's totally true. So talking about the assets types, right? So I understand that there could be some of the physical assets and digital assets that can be tokenized. So with digital assets, it's more or less kind of understood, right? So digital asset doesn't have any kind of physical representation and everything. But with physical assets, it's a much more complex thing, because you have these physical things that you have to account for, and then you have representation in the network. So how does that work? Are there some like people that watch over the correspondence of these items, everything like that?
So I need to elaborate a few words about like digital assets, because it's again crucial that tokenized system has to become a primary source of information. So stocks are virtual assets, like non-tangible assets, but if they're just tokenized without legal recognition, it means nothing. So first of all, you have to say this particular registry is a primary source of information, then it will work. In case of physical assets, you have to have a custodian, it's a centralized party eventually. Obviously, I mean, if you deal with you can tokenize Bitcoin. It makes sense as well. Let's say I'm a bank and I want to have accounts in Bitcoin. So I accept Bitcoins, I put them in cold storage, and I issue IOU. It's just numbers and accounts. It's like PayPal, and then users can transact. It's like Coinbase. That Coinbase is a Bitcoin bank. So they essentially kind of tokenizing Bitcoin, but that's not done through digital signature. So, and the custodian in this case can be decentralized. So because you can apply a multi-sig concept to cryptocurrency, that's why I can say, oh, the custodian will be run by like 10 parties, and 10 of them have to sign in order to release the asset itself. Okay, in the case of physical asset, it becomes interesting because you can have only a centralized custodian, which, let's say, you are storing like barrels of whiskey. That was why I mentioned that, because not because I'm drinking wine, no, but there was an interesting case in 1980s in the US where some gentleman sold IOUs for barrels of whiskey that was stored in his cellar. And the SEC came after him for selling securities. And it's a nice case. I would recommend, if anybody interested in tokenized commodities, to go and look for the whiskey barrel case and look how they treat that. So again, you have to have a centralized custodian, and users have to trust custodian for sure, because if asset is like stolen or lost or whatever, then the token worth zero. And that's, again, it introduces an interesting problem, because sometimes people say, oh, where is your token issued for a tokenized asset? Is it run by smart contract or no? Private blockchain or public? And then if it's private, they say, how about security? But the question is, come on, guys, like if it's an asset, physical assets that have to be in a custodian, the biggest risk is not the accounting system risk, but the custodian risk. So it has to be audited. The users have to trust it. But it's normal. It's again, it introduces the question of trust. But in case of physical asset, you always have to trust somebody, and that's fine. It's users. People do that for centuries when they store like commodities or maybe some goods and services provided by some companies also could be tokenized. Let's say I want to tokenize computational power, right? So I say Amazon. Now Amazon introduces a token which equals 1 gigaflops of computational power, right? To like compute AI or like do machine learning. And basically, in this case, Amazon becomes a custodian for that service that they provide, and whoever comes with this token gets the right for this 1 petaflops of computational power. So it's not only about physical assets, it's about services, and services are always centralized because it's about like SLA.
Yeah. So that's actually interesting. So then obviously we're dealing with the situation where certain industries that are having certain assets in their possession, being physical or services or commodities or digital assets and stuff like that. So they have a different level or a different threshold into entering into tokenization, right? So I would assume there are some industries that can benefit tokenization. It's a low-hanging fruit for them, and for some, it's a harder deal. So could you give me a couple of examples of industries that would be the first ones to benefit from tokenization?
All right. So from the kind of definition of tokenization, which implies that assets are tradable, and secondary market makes sense. Assets that are fungible, divisible, and tradable, they are the lowest hanging fruit, right? So anything that is equal to like pieces of gold or commodities or services, etc. And obviously, the second factor is that industries that doesn't require heavy regulation. The first one that will be like tokenized, maybe like loyalty points, gift cards, but they have some, or where regulation is very clear, like electronic money, like some securities, but kind of things are not that simple when you touch, legacy systems. So they will be definitely, like, services will be tokenized faster than the rest, I believe, because users already buying and selling these services, and they can trade them within one company. Let's say Amazon introduces a voucher for a discount. That's
So you already briefly touched on the regulation side of things, right? Could you then expand a bit more on the some of the challenges that are out there, or things that the industry have to overcome to get that market penetration, so that people can easily tokenize their things? What do you see are the major barriers there?
the major barrier is absence of clear standards of digital identity. Because like otherwise you have to be localized. Let's say you can only work with one particular custodian or system, and everyone will have its own like subsystem, its own wallet, etc., its own exchange. The second piece is that like IT is a huge, challenge, because even developing the system, like all the platforms that we've mentioned, like Hyperledger and R3, and so it takes a lot of time to build a product on top. So the platform is like a Lego assemble kit, and then in order to build a product, it takes like a year or two, and then you have risks and ROI and etc. And the second thing is integration. Even when you build that, you need to integrate in your legacy systems, connect to like KYC, connect to IML engines, teach your staff, connect to CRM, ERP, some accounting, legacy accounting, reporting systems, etc. So integration is everything. So actually, businesses that didn't have any accounting system might be the first target, because they don't have anything to switch from. So I think that will be. So we are working mainly with startups. We used to work mainly with startups, which there could be a startup within an enterprise which says, oh, let's automate this process. It wasn't automated at all. It was like manual, or it wasn't even present in the company. Let's build a system, and it will like allow users to trade certain assets. Could be an investment forward contract for some services. But from legal perspective, I don't think tokenization needs additional like law, because if it's a security, it's governed by a security law and heavy test. If it's commodity, it's governed by commodity. So as I said, like token is a technical term. It's not something new. It's a new asset. It's not a new asset class. The token always represents some asset. And then whatever regulation applies to an asset itself, then this regulation will apply to a token. The only difference is that people started to dream about the globalization, right? So obviously, because of cleanness of the infrastructure, you can onboard everybody. It's just online. You don't need to come and physically sign. It's just automated. That's why you can sell it to everybody. And that introduces new problems, like how do you actually sell it to investors from all over the world? And how do they trade with each other, having all these differences in laws? And this is the challenge, not the tokenization itself. So if you say, oh, we are selling only to like Switzerland investors, and they have a standard process of onboarding and secondary market, you don't need anything else. It's just another IT system. It used to be one, now it's another. So law, it's not touched at all.
Yeah, we're quickly running out of time. This is very interesting. I would spend like another hour talking about it. So let's quickly go through some of the,
okay, we'll try to shorten. Yeah.
No, but that's great. Totally appreciate it. We should have like a volume 2 for this topic of the webinar. But could you give a bit, a few examples for the technology stacks that you can implement tokenization on? So you already mentioned that, if you're taking like a framework, it's a pretty low level. You will have to build a lot of stuff, and I can totally relate to that. There's some ready concepts from what I see that can be implemented. So could you elaborate on some of the technology stack that you see enable that?
Yeah, if to consider tokenization as just issuing a token on some platform, then you can do it on any public blockchain, which is just, I would say, 10% from real tokenization, which is the transformation of the business processes within the business. Like, how do you actually transform your internal ledger? And if this ledger has to be synchronized with the with exchange or with some external depository, custodians, etc. So this will be real tokenization. In order to achieve that, public blockchain is not enough, obviously. You have to build it. The most popular platforms are anyway, like Hyperledger, Stellar, Quorum, like Corda, etc. So we have its own platform. I would say it's more like a product. So it's not just software components that you have to just build. It's already like white label ready. So that was our business for years.
Nice. So I understand that you will have an announcement about that, so people will be able to kind of get the URL and check it out. So what would be your implementation recommendations then? So let's say I am a business, enterprise, or SMB that is kind of considering to implement tokenization for my organization. What would be your kind of high level recommendation or steps that I have to go through?
Yeah, steps would be very simple. I would say start from the centralized system. So even if you use, like, you should use blockchain. This is like just for the number of reasons, of security reasons, like integrity, non-repudiation, distributed decision making, accessibility. So you should run the system within your own business. Then you don't deal with the complexity of onboarding many partners, running them nodes, and having issues with regulation. Then if it succeeds, when your user like the idea of having a secondary market, then you can onboard some other partners within the ecosystem, which will maintain a validator nodes. And you can onboard auditors or regulators, which will maintain auditor nodes. And the crucial difference between the traditional centralized approach, and which is in the beginning is centralized, step one is a centralized thing, but in step two, when you onboard more partners as validators, they don't need to trust you on managing the ledger, because they see the ledger fully, they see all the transactions, and they can validate them, they can audit them. But also these transactions can be private. So they can say that, they can see that the amount of asset that was transferred within accounts is correct, and no rules were broken, but everything is like according to the rules.
Right.
Yeah, exact amount. This is a confidential transaction concept. So this is the crucial benefit. And the step 3 would be onboarding more partners and creating an ecosystem, which will be, let's say you want to, just an example, create a land registry. If it's a public registry, so for example, in Ukraine, it's a public registry, then technically every citizen should be able to maintain a list, right, of all the pieces of land, and maybe validate that, or maybe you just distribute between them, between notaries, between like thousands of notaries. And then it will become a public chain technically, because it's available to everyone. So this steps: centralized, small decentralization, and then decentralization if you need that.
Yeah, that's a very good approach, because you're not biting something you cannot swallow, right? So you're going to start small and then building, but at the same time using some of the concepts from the very beginning that are essential for that expansion. So yeah, thanks for that. I actually read your this book that you shared on tokenization. Super amazing, very nice, kind of meaty content, as I call it, right? Do you have any ideas about when it will be available in English?
Oh, it's already, like, the next slide, I guess, will show the QR code to download that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So that was the two small announcements that we have in this webinar. First, about the book about tokenization. I forgot to mention another one, which was recent news. It's our book about blockchain. It's a like technological book, so it's written by geeks for normal people. So it has a lot of pictures, explanations of how things work, like double spending, tax, but it also has some nice, funny pictures. So it's like a principles. So, and book about tokenization is, it's a small one. It's not that heavy. It's like 35 pages long, and it explains the core principles of tokenization as we believe. And it focuses on tokenization of real assets. There for sure will be an economy decentralized, autonomous, censorship resistant. For sure. It's just the proportion of this economy to the economy that we have now, it's like for now negligible. Yeah.
Right. Great. So we will get to that slide, with announcements, so you guys will be able to see the QR code and the URL. So let's jump into the Q&A real quick. We're running out of time to be considerable to you guys' time. So a lot of questions, actually. So the first one is interesting. So I'm interested in using blockchain for facilitating cash payments within refugee communities. Which blockchain system would you recommend?
It's a good system. You cannot just take and use blockchain for that. You have to build essentially a bank or financial institution which will open accounts to that refugees, online or offline or somehow. And then these accounts will be used to, so these people who opened an account, they essentially become customers of that particular bank, and they will spend money using that bank, like APIs, etc. Yeah, obviously you can say just install Bitcoin or Ethereum wallets and just we will send you some Bitcoins and Ether, but probably it's not the best way to help refugees at this point of time. Any other point means creation of a bank or financial institution. And for that, so that's specifically for that purpose, we created Token D, this tokenization framework, in order to launch the system not within half a year or a year, but within like a few weeks.
Got it. Yeah, quickly running through all the other questions because there's so many. So what about the accounting standards? Does it define how tokens are going to be treated using IFRS and US GAAP? Is it inventory, asset, intangible, etc.?
Probably no, because as I said, like token is a digital ownership right for some other asset. So depending on the type of this asset, that's accounting applies. But token is just, it's a technical term. It's like a balance on an account in a digital database. So tokens, if you talk about utility tokens, that's a different story. Yes, I cannot answer that because the rules are different. But if it's asset-backed token, then the asset will be governed, not the token itself.
Right. Cool. So another interesting question. So how the movement of physical assets and resulting change in ownership is corresponding with the digital tokenization system? How the blockchain system knows about the change, etc.
It is amazing question because technically one custodian can be responsible for one ledger. When some asset is moved out of the custodian, the corresponding token has to be destroyed, like redeemed basically, by somebody. And then, the information about the transaction will be kept there, but doesn't make sense to keep an ownership right for something that is not already there. So it's a role of a custodian to update the system on any change of the reserves, right, of the asset itself. So you have to trust custodian at this point.
So,
but that's normal thing. If you consider warehouse receipts that are very common, then it's the same story. Just they were in paper form, and now they will be in a digital form with digital keys. So, but the business process is the same.
Right. So, and then the question that is related to a couple of more, but just to have a granular view on this. So, how to solve a legal aspect of tokenization? I mean, tokenized assets should be recognized by financial authority. Is that possible nowadays? And yes. So, on a kind of regulatory and
I'm not an expert in legal, but again, if you say, here is the hotel and we want to tokenize fractions of it, and then we want to trade it, that becomes a security. But the problem not just in tokens, you can do it in a normal paper form. You can say, oh, let's split the ownership of the hotel for 1 million pieces, and which bank like piece of paper will represent 1 million of it, and then trade it. So these papers will become securities, and they'll be have to be governed by some law. So with tokens, the same story. It depends on the business case that you're doing. So it's not the tokenization itself that introduces these new questions, but rather the concept of fractional ownership and secondary market. So if your asset, these two are solved, then you can do it in paper form, in digital form, in tokenized form, doesn't matter. But first, fractional ownership and secondary market.
All right, well, let's conclude with that. So guys, all of the questions will be answered. I will pass all of these questions over to the speakers, and they will answer them in text. So be sure that those will be answered if you got your email in. So let's quickly jump into a couple of announcements. Pavel, do you want to start with your announcements? I see the slide is on.
Yeah, so first of all, you can download our newest book about theory of tokenization. So it's short one, please. You can send us feedback. And also we released a developer edition of TokenD, which is our software platform, white label platform for tokenization. You can download a solution brief, technical briefs, and the platform itself, and build on top of that. Yeah. So this is an enterprise software. So we license that. It's a normal SaaS or a license model.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing the book specifically, because I read it and I found it really instrumental and very clear without any kind of, sugar coating and things like that. Very nice.
Yeah, there's no advertisement in there, so yes.
Yeah, right. That's good. That's good. All right, and I'll cover our announcements. So we mentioned already that within Intellectsoft Blockchain Lab we have what's called workshops. We find it very helpful and actually critical for businesses to actually go through some preparation phase, planning phase, looking at the business case of things and making sure that blockchain is actually applicable in your case, or tokenization for that matter. What is the best strategy to go through? What are the steps to follow to enable that, specifically for bigger businesses, for SMBs and enterprises. So if you're interested in that, feel free to send me a note in LinkedIn or to our corporate email, or just go to intellectsoft.net. That concludes it, guys. Thank you very much for your time. Everybody who joined us, thank you. I hope it was helpful to you. For the speakers, Pavel, Tim, thank you very much for sharing your experience relentlessly. I hope to see you again in such webinars or panels or conferences together. And just a couple of more things on the last slide. There are some LinkedIn profiles on the last slide that you can go to add the speakers in LinkedIn. And then, guys, if you have any feedback about this webinar, or you have some ideas about upcoming webinars, things that we have to cover, some of the thoughts that you had on this one, feel free to write on blockchain@intellectsoft.net. We'll follow up with you, and we'll see you at the upcoming episodes of the webinar. So thank you very much, and see you around.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.